Now you've seen how IStructuralEquatable works to give structural equality on arrays, you won't be surprised to learn that there is a similar interface, this time called IStructuralComparable, which does the same thing, except it does ordering comparisons rather than equality comparisons. IStructuralComparable can therefore tell you whether structurally one collection comes before or after another one. So if we take our StructuralEquatable code, I'll put the two arrays back to containing the same strings, and I'll add the code to do a structural comparison. In this new code, I've cast the array to IStructuralComparable. Just as for IStructuralEquatable, you need to do an explicit cast here to the interface, which obviously means you need to be explicit about the fact that you are doing a structural comparison, which is probably a good thing. IStructuralComparable exposes a compareTo method, so we call that. Just like for IStructuralEquatable, this takes two parameters, the collection that we are comparing this collection with, and a comparer that implements iComparer of t, and which will be used to compare each element. For this example, I've gone with the string comparer that does ordinal comparisons ignoring the case, to match our structural equality code. The compareTo method returns an integer, which follows the usual conventions. And if we run this now, since the two arrays contain exactly the same elements, we would expect a compare method to return 0, indicating equality. And that's what we find. I'll just change the second array and make the second element pear instead of orange. Now pear comes after orange in alphabetical order, and a structural comparison will look at each element in turn, so we would expect a structural comparison will now tell us that the first array comes before the second array. And referring back to the convention for compareTo return values, we would expect this situation to return a negative value. So let's try that. We see that the IStructuralEquatable.equals method has returned false, showing these arrays are not now the same, and the IStructuralComparable compareTo method has indeed returned a negative number as we expected. IStructuralComparable unfortunately suffers the same problem as IStructuralEquatable. There are very few types that implement it, but you can use it for arrays and tuples.